20 hens, not eaten, not carried off one by one over a slow, cautious week. 20 hens dead in the yard in a single night, and the fox that did it probably wasn't even hungry when it finished. That's not an exaggeration for effect. It's a documented behavior wildlife biologists call surplus killing, and it turns a predator that should only take what it needs into something closer to a massacre. For a family farm running on hand labor, no insurance payout, and a flock that pays real bills, that single night can wipe out a season's income. So the question isn't really about the fox at all. It's about what it takes to outthink an animal that's been raiding henhouses since before there were fences to stop it. To understand why the fox does this, you have to throw out the idea that predators are efficient by nature. A fox breaking into a coop full of birds that can't fly away and have nowhere to hide isn't hunting anymore. It's reacting to an opportunity that almost never exists in the wild. Dozens of prey animals trapped in one place with no chance of escape. The Dutch biologist Hans Krook documented this exact pattern back in the 1960s, watching foxes kill nearly 1,500 nesting gulls on stormy nights in England, and abandon almost all of them uneaten. The birds sat still because of the weather. The foxes just kept killing because they could. A henhouse at night is the same trap, built by us instead of a storm. And that's the part easy to miss from the outside. The fox isn't clever in the henhouse. It's just been handed conditions it's built to exploit. A bite to the base of the skull, fast, almost silent, and it moves to the next bird before the first one stops twitching. Farmers who've lived through it describe finding half a flock gone by morning with barely a feather disturbed near the door, because the fox never had to fight for a single one of them. The real cleverness happens earlier. It happens in the days before the attack, when the fox is testing the fence line, learning the farm dog's schedule, figuring out exactly when the coop door gets left open a few minutes too long. There's a season to this too, and it matters more than most first-time chicken keepers realize. Fox predation on poultry climbs sharply from late summer into fall, when that year's kits are old enough to hunt, but not yet skilled enough to catch wild prey reliably. A vixen with a den of nearly grown kits nearby isn't just feeding herself anymore, she's teaching, and a henhouse is the easiest classroom she'll ever find. That's often why the worst nights, the ones where a farmer loses most of a flock at once, tend to land in August, September, October, right when everyone assumes the danger has passed because summer's heat has broken and the garden is coming in. The morning after tells its own story, and anyone who's found it knows the details stay with you. Feathers everywhere, drifted against the fence like dirty snow. A few birds untouched, but dead where they fell. Wings still half spread from the last panicked scramble. No blood pooled anywhere because a fox kills clean. A single bite that severs the spine before the bird even has time to fully wake. What's missing is almost worse than what's there. No sign of a struggle at the door. No forced entry, most of the time. Just a gap somewhere that was too small to notice the day before, and plenty large enough at 2 in the morning. Which is why the fight against it can't happen at the coop door. By the time a fox is inside, the outcome is already decided. It has to happen everywhere else, on the fence, in the yard, in the rhythm of the whole farm. And this is where AMISH and other plain community farmers have built something that looks almost old-fashioned, but is in practice layered and deliberate. Not primitive, not a lack of modern tools, a different set of tools, chosen on purpose, that happen to work. Start with the fence itself. Ordinary chicken wire keeps birds in. It does almost nothing to keep a fox out, because a fox can dig under it in minutes, or simply push through a weak seam near a post. What actually stops a fox is a hot wire, a single electrified strand or a full run of electric poultry netting buried a foot into the ground where the digging happens. Touch it once, and a fox that might have tested that fence every night for a week generally doesn't come back. The shock itself is brief and mild by design. What actually does the work is memory, the fox learning, fast, that this particular meal costs more than it's worth. Farmers who run electric netting year after year report the same pattern eventually. Predators stop testing it altogether, and even the birds learn not to cross the line when the current is briefly down, because the memory of that first shock outlasts the outage. On farms that raise birds on pasture rather than behind permanent walls, that netting gets moved every few days along with the flock, which does double duty. It keeps the ground from turning into a parasite-ridden mess, and it keeps a predator from ever mapping a fixed target long enough to plan around it. A fox that spent 3 nights learning the gaps in a fence line has to start over completely once that fence has moved 40 feet to fresh grass. It sounds like a small inconvenience. For a predator that hunts by memorized routine, it's closer to erasing its notes the night before the exam. Fencing alone still isn't enough though, because it does nothing after dark for birds that spend all day ranging free, and it does nothing against a fox willing to dig deeper or wait for a weak spot to fail. That's where the guardian animals come in, and this is the part that tends to surprise people who assume farm dogs are just there for company. A Great Pyrenees, or an Akbash, or in some setups, a llama or even a goose isn't trained to chase or fight. It's bred and raised to simply belong to the flock, sleeping with the birds, patrolling the same ground night after night, and reacting to anything that doesn't belong there before it gets close enough to matter. The training for this starts almost from birth. A guardian pup gets raised inside the flock itself, not in the house, not around other dogs, so that by the time it's grown, its entire sense of home is bound up in the birds it protects. Farmers who've added a guardian dog to a pasture that used to lose birds regularly often describe predator losses dropping to almost nothing within a season. Not because the dog is winning fights, but because 120 pounds of dog sleeping in the yard changes what a fox is willing to risk. Foxes are cautious animals by nature. They test defenses before committing, circling a property for days, sometimes weeks, before ever setting a paw inside the fence line. A guardian animal on site means that test almost never gets a green light in the first place. Guard donkeys work on a similar principle, though for different reasons. A donkey has a natural dislike of canines, foxes included, and will chase, stomp, or simply bray loud enough to wake the whole property at the first sign of something moving wrong in the pasture at night. Geese do something similar through sheer volume and aggression, hissing and charging anything unfamiliar long before it gets within striking distance of the flock. None of these animals are foolproof on their own. A determined coyote pack can sometimes overwhelm even a capable guardian dog, and a lone goose isn't stopping much of anything larger than itself. The strength is in the combination, fence plus guardian plus routine, so that a predator testing one layer still has to get through the other 2 before it ever reaches a bird. Then there's the discipline that costs nothing but attention, and this is where the Amish approach to farm life does its quietest work. Chickens go into a secured coop at dusk every single night, without exception, because dusk to dawn is exactly when a fox is most active and most confident. No exceptions for a busy evening. No leaving the door open because everyone's tired and the birds will probably be fine. On a farm running without electric lighting, on a timer, or an app reminder on a phone, that discipline has to live in the routine itself, built into the rhythm of the day, the same way milking or feeding is. It's not a workaround for lacking technology. For many of these families, it's a deliberate choice, rooted in a faith that treats steady, careful stewardship of the land and its animals as an obligation, not just a chore to optimize. The predator-proofing isn't separate from that mindset. It grows straight out of it. A coop closed on time isn't just good farm management in that worldview. It's part of caring properly for a creature that depends entirely on the people responsible for it. That's a very different starting point than treating the birds as a problem to be engineered around. And it shows up in the small habits that outsiders often miss entirely. The daily head count at dusk. The child assigned to check the latch a second time before bed. The older farmer who still walks the fence line himself most evenings, instead of trusting it to hold on its own. Add it up, and you get a fox facing a farm with almost no easy openings left. The fence bites back. The guardian animal is already awake and already close. The coop door is shut before the light is gone, every night, whether anyone feels like it or not. Compare that to an unprotected flock, birds locked in a plain wire coop with a gap under the door and no dog anywhere near it, and the difference in outcome isn't subtle. One farm loses a handful of birds a year, if that. The other loses 20 in a single night and never sees the fox that did it. There's an economic weight behind all of this that's easy to underestimate from the outside. A laying flock isn't a hobby on these farms, it's grocery money, egg root income, sometimes the difference between a good month and a hard one. Losing 20 hens overnight doesn't just mean fewer eggs tomorrow. It means restocking pullets that won't lay for another 5 or 6 months, replacing a flock's worth of feed conversion and labour that can't be recovered with an insurance check, because there usually isn't one. That's part of why the defences stack the way they do. It isn't excess caution. It's a farm protecting the one asset that can vanish entirely between sunset and sunrise if the routine slips even once. Compare that to what a lot of backyard keepers try first, usually after losing a bird or two rather than a whole flock. Motion sensor lights, a radio left playing in the coop overnight, string tied at ankle height around the run meant to spook a fox that brushes against it in the dark. Some of these buy a little time, none of them hold up against a hungry, experienced fox for long. Because a startled predator that gets away with the raid once simply comes back better prepared the second time, and a light or a noise that worked in October is often background noise the fox has learned to ignore by December. The methods that actually last are the ones a fox can't out-clever through repeated exposure. A fence that always bites the same way, regardless of how many nights it's tested, and a guardian animal whose presence never becomes predictable enough to plan around. None of this makes the fox go away. It's still out there, still testing fences on quiet nights, still capable of that same devastating instinct if it ever finds a genuine gap. The people who raise chickens for a living know that. They're not trying to defeat the fox once and move on. They're managing a threat that resets every season, every litter of kits that grows up and needs new territory, every young fox learning the same tricks its parents used on some other farm 3 fields over. What they've built isn't a fortress, it's a habit, repeated so consistently that the fox simply runs out of easy nights before it ever gets its 20 hens. So maybe the real lesson isn't about foxes at all. It's that the animal has never really changed its behavior. What's changed on the farms that keep their flocks intact is the discipline standing between the fox and the coop door. That's the whole difference between a bad morning and a total loss. And it's been sitting there the whole time, not in some clever trap, but in a fence that bites, a dog that never sleeps too deep, and a door that gets closed on time, every single time, whether anyone feels like it or not. Was the fox ever really the threat? Or was it always just waiting for the one night the routine slipped? That's the question every one of these farms is quietly answering, over and over, every single evening at dusk. If you've ever lost a flock to a predator, or you're setting up a coop of your own and wondering what actually works, the comment section on this one is worth reading. A lot of people have learned this lesson the hard way, on farms nothing like these, with fences that looked strong enough right up until the morning they weren't. And they're usually willing to tell you exactly how it happened to them.